People see the shop. This is the story they don't see. My name is Sufian, and this is the story behind Dahab Perfumes. Welcome to the Scent Room with Sufian. If you've ever stood in the shop or watched one of these episodes, you've probably wondered at some point how the man sitting in this perfume shop actually got here. That's genuinely what this episode is about. Not the shop itself, everything before it. I've never told this properly, start to finish, in one sitting. Bits of it here and there, to people who asked, but not the whole thing, in order, the way it actually happened. So that's what this is. No performance, just the story. In 1999, I left Sharjah and came to London as a student, with one suitcase and no idea what life would actually become. I left behind my parents, my friends, everything familiar. For the first time, I was completely on my own. No safety net, no guarantees, no plan. Just one decision to start again in a place where nobody knew my name. That's a strange kind of freedom, if I'm honest. Exciting and frightening in the same breath. And from the outside, nobody could really tell the difference between the two. You put on a normal face, you get on with it. Nobody around you needs to know how uncertain you actually feel. I didn't know it then, but that moment changed everything. Looking back, now over 25 years later, I can see how much of what came after started right there, with nothing but a suitcase and a decision. Every chapter I'm about to tell you connects back to that one moment. Even the chapters that felt, at the time, like they had nothing to do with it at all. Not long after I arrived, I started working door to door, selling mobile phones, alarms, credit cards, long days, a lot of doors closed in my face, and you learn quickly not to take it personally. You knock, somebody says no, sometimes politely, sometimes not, and you move on to the next door. It teaches you something about resilience that a classroom never could. That's actually where I met my wife. We were 20 and 19. We got married, and it wasn't long before we had our first son on the way, born in 2003. No home, no money, no stability. But we had each other, and somehow that was enough. Because when life is uncertain, you lean on what matters most. I think that's a lesson a lot of people learn far too late, if they learn it at all. We learned it early, out of necessity, more than wisdom. But we learned it. When you're that young, with that little, you find out very quickly what actually matters and what doesn't. Money helps. It genuinely does. But it isn't the thing that gets you through the hardest nights. To support our young family, I took a job at a local Budgens supermarket. I remember cleaning dried milk off the shelves, mopping the floors, stacking boxes, shift after shift. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody grows up dreaming of a job like that. But it was necessary. And there's something honest about work like that. You either show up and do it properly or you don't. There's no pretending. And no one's watching to see if you cut corners, except yourself. Every shift taught me discipline, and discipline became the foundation of everything that came after, even when I didn't realize it at the time. Years later, standing behind a market stall, or now in the shop, I still think about those shifts more than people would probably expect. The lesson never really left me. There's a kind of humility that comes from mopping a floor at the end of a long day, and I don't think I'd trade that lesson for an easier start, even if I'd had the choice. Eventually, we got the keys to a council flat. It wasn't luxury, but it was ours. A front door we could lock, a place for our son to grow up. 2 more followed over the years, all boys, then in 2007 and then in 2011. 3 sons, each one arriving in a completely different chapter of the story. And for the first time, we had stability. Not comfort exactly, just stability. A place that was genuinely ours. After years of nothing being certain, I don't think people who've always had a stable home really understand what that first front door feels like. It's not about the flat itself. It's about finally being able to stop bracing for the next thing to go wrong. I remember it being small. I remember it being enough. There's a difference between those two things that took me a while to actually understand. And once I understood it, I don't think I ever forgot it. Sometimes success isn't money, it's peace. I believed that then, and I believe it even more now. Especially now, running a business, where peace is honestly harder to come by than most people assume. People think once you own something, once you've got a shop with your name on the business, that the uncertainty stops. It doesn't. It just changes shape. After that, I moved into mortgages, working in Richmond. Things were improving, on paper at least. Steady income, some stability, the kind of job most people would have held on to. And honestly, most people around me thought I should have held on to it too. But something didn't feel right. I can't fully explain what it was. Just a feeling that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I walked away just before the 2008 financial crisis hit. At the time, it made no sense. Everyone around me thought I'd made a mistake. But growth rarely does make sense while it's happening. You usually only understand it looking backward, once you can actually see where the decision led. I've come to trust that feeling since, that quiet sense that something isn't right, even when everything on paper says it should be fine. Looking back, that decision probably saved us from something much harder than what we actually went through. I can't prove that, I just believe it. And I think it's one of the earliest examples of a pattern that repeats through this whole story, walking away from something stable, without a clear plan for what comes next, simply because staying felt wrong. My journey into luxury started on a night shift desk. I joined Hilton London Metropole on the Switchboard, not management, not glamour, just work, in the middle of the night, answering calls most people never think about. Wrong numbers, late requests, guests who couldn't sleep and just wanted someone to talk to for a minute. But I gave everything I had to that job, small as it was, and over time, I moved up to assistant night manager. From there, I became night manager at the Waldorf Hilton. And around that same time, my wife started her first business, Islamic calligraphy, from home, late nights, early mornings, balancing family life around it. We were both building something at the same time, just in different ways. And I think that mattered more than either of us realized at the time. Two people working odd hours, chasing something better, without ever really talking about it in those terms. That was just what we did. Then came the Shangri-La at the Sharjah, one of London's tallest buildings. And within months, I was promoted to duty manager. Around that same period, she moved into modest fashion and hijabs. A different chapter. Same effort, same pattern, both of us building something new every time life moved us into a new stage. Luxury taught me something simple, something I still carry with me now, running a much smaller business. Standards don't change based on who's watching. You hold the same standard, whether it's a quiet Tuesday morning or the busiest night of the year, whether the person in front of you is somebody important or somebody nobody will ever recognize. The standard doesn't move either way. And from a switchboard desk, I ended up in rooms I never expected. At the Waldorf Hilton, I met guests including Lewis Hamilton, members of Blue, and Cat Stevens. At the Sharjah, I worked in environments where footballers like Jerome Boateng and Riyad Mahrez passed through. Actors including Samuel L. Jackson, Colin Farrell, and Benedict Cumberbatch also came through the hotel. Even political figures and global leaders visited during my time there. But the lesson was never about fame. It was about professionalism. Because in that world, you stop seeing celebrities. You just see people with the same basic needs as anyone else walking through a hotel lobby. Tired, hungry, wanting to be treated properly. And your job is always the same: excellence, regardless of who's in front of you. It's a strange thing to explain to people working outside that world. You think working around famous faces every day would be exciting, and maybe for the first few weeks it is, but it wears off fast. And what's left underneath is just the job, getting the details right, being consistent, treating the next guest exactly the same as the last one, whether anyone would recognize them or not. I carried that straight into Dahab Perfumes, if I'm honest. Whether someone's buying a small bottle of oil or a full-size parfum, the standard doesn't move. That's not a coincidence. That's years of training showing up in a much smaller room. I didn't leave that world behind when I left hospitality. I just bought it somewhere smaller and made it my own. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I studied while working full-time nights. I completed a master's in hospitality through Cornell University in New York, while still working full-time. Long shifts, late nights, early mornings, studying on breaks, studying after a night shift, when most people were just waking up. There were moments I questioned everything, whether it was worth it, whether I was just exhausting myself for nothing. But I kept going, and I graduated with honors. Discipline became my foundation. Not talent, not luck, just showing up again and again, even on the nights I didn't want to. I think that's the part people skip over when they hear master's degree. They picture lecture halls and libraries. For me, most of it happened around night shifts, whenever I could find the time. There's no dramatic story there, just consistency, repeated for longer than felt reasonable. If I'm honest, I still don't fully know how I got through that period. Not in a dramatic way, just practically. There were only so many hours in a day, and somehow I made all of them count for something, even the ones that should have been for sleeping. And it wasn't just me building across all of that. Before Dahab, we were already building together. Calligraphy at the Waldorf, modest fashion at the Sharjah. Some parts grew, some slowed down when life shifted focus elsewhere. Nothing was wasted, even the parts that didn't fully take off. Now, she started again, a baking business from home, alongside working full-time with me in Dahab Perfumes, already achieving a 5-star food hygiene rating from our local council. We don't call them failures, we call them chapters. That's not just a nice phrase, it's genuinely how we've learned to look back at all of it. Every single one of those chapters taught her something that shows up in how she works now, and honestly, in how Dahab runs today too. You can't really separate her earlier chapters from what we've built together. They're all part of the same thread. In 2017, I left hospitality after everything I'd built there. I walked away and tried something new. It didn't work. 1 month later, I walked away from that too. That's not an easy thing to admit, honestly. Walking away twice in the space of a year isn't something you plan for, and it isn't something you feel good about while it's happening. But sometimes life resets you, not because you failed, but because your next chapter hasn't started yet, even if you can't see it coming. I remember that period being genuinely uncertain, more uncertain than the early years, if I'm honest. Because by then, I thought I'd already figured things out. You spend years building something, a career, a title, a reputation, and then you walk away from it deliberately, and there's no roadmap for what happens after that. Nobody hands you a plan. You just have to sit with the uncertainty until something new starts to take shape. Then it started with trust. A family friend gave me Arabian perfumes. Sell first, pay later. No contract, no pressure, just trust that I'd come back and pay what I owed once I'd sold them. That trust became Dahab Perfume. In 2018, one table, one market, one beginning. We started at Dagenham Market, and not long after, at Bovingdon Market too. And from that very first day, my wife was right there beside me, not helping out from a distance, standing at the table, every single market, every single day, exactly as equally as I was. This was never something I built and she supported. This was always something we built together, side by side, from the very first table onward. And that wasn't the only thing she was doing. By then, we had 3 sons, and she was doing the school runs too, dropping them off, picking them up, raising 3 boys through all of that, while still being beside me at every single market. I genuinely don't know how she managed both at once. I just know she did, without ever making a big thing of it. I think about that a lot actually. How something this size started with somebody simply believing in me before I'd given them any real reason to. That kind of trust is rare, and I don't think I've ever properly thanked him for it. Not in the way it deserves. It's the kind of thing that only really makes sense in hindsight. How much one person's willingness to trust you can genuinely change the direction of your entire life. One table, that's genuinely where it started. Not a shop, not a plan for a shop, just a table. A handful of bottles, and the two of us standing behind it together, learning as we went, talking to people one at a time. The exact same way I'd learned to years earlier, knocking on doors that mostly said no. Except this time, I wasn't doing it alone. By the time COVID hit, we'd become something at those two markets. We were the first, and for a long while, the only perfumers actually from Dubai, trading at either one of them. People knew us for that. Then COVID shut everything down. Markets closed, everything stopped overnight. Years of work gone in moments. Not slowly, overnight. No markets to trade at, no customers walking past the stall, just silence for a long time. That silence is honestly hard to describe to somebody who didn't live through it running a small business. It wasn't just quiet. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from underneath. Something would only just started to build properly. But giving up was never actually an option. Not really. So we rebuilt together. The same way we built everything else. Slowly, patiently, one step at a time. Until there was something to rebuild onto. There wasn't a single moment where things suddenly got better. It was just steady, quiet effort, repeated for a long time. Until eventually, it started to add up again. I think that period taught us more than almost anything before it. Strangely enough, not because it was a good time. It genuinely wasn't. But because it proved something to the both of us. That we could lose almost everything we'd built and still choose to start again. Without either of us needing to say much about it out loud. We just got back up and carried on. Something else happened around that time worth mentioning honestly. Arabian Perfumes started going properly viral on social media. Suddenly, everywhere you looked, new sellers were appearing. All talking about oud and perfume oils like they just discovered them. And genuinely, I think that's a good thing. More people paying attention to this kind of perfumery. More people curious about it. That's good for everyone, including us. But it does mean our story sits a little differently in the middle of all that. I was born in the United Arab Emirates. Dagenham and Bovingdon weren't a trend for us. They were where we started, years before any of this was popular. Standing at a table, learning it properly, one customer at a time, long before it had a hashtag. Sometimes people walk into the shop now, and when we tell them we're from Dubai, they smile politely and say, everyone says that. I understand why they say it. There's a lot of noise out there now, but we were there before the noise. And honestly, that's not something we need to prove loudly. It's just true, and we're happy to let people find out for themselves in their own time. We opened our first Dahab Perfumes store in Grays. People see the shop, but they don't see the journey. Every restart, every sacrifice, every chapter we built together, one after another, over more than 25 years. My wife has been part of every single stage of it, not just supporting it from the side, building alongside it, the same as she always has. From calligraphy at a kitchen table to standing in the shop today, that thread never actually broke, even through everything that changed around it. Our sons are grown now, or nearly. The eldest in his final year studying medicine at UCL. The second studying pharmacology. The youngest still finishing school. 3 boys who grew up watching all of this happen around them. Market stalls and shifts, and everything in between. The shop isn't the end, it's the beginning of everything next. So if you're wondering how the man sitting in this perfume shop actually got here, that's the honest answer. Not one big decision, 25 years of ordinary ones. Most of them made without knowing where they'd lead. A suitcase, a door-to-door sales job, a supermarket shift, a council flat, a job I walked away from before anyone thought I should. A switchboard, a master's finished at strange hours, a friend who trusted me before I'd earned it, a pandemic that nearly took it all away, and a shop, finally, that holds all of that inside it, whether people walking in can see it or not. If you're sitting somewhere right now in the middle of your own version of one suitcase, or a council flat, or a job that isn't glamorous but pays the bills, I hope this tells you something honestly. None of it is wasted. Not the supermarket shifts, not the failed month, not the years that didn't go anywhere. All of it becomes part of the story eventually, even the parts that don't feel like it at the time. Nobody does really. You just keep going, chapter after chapter. And it's only when you finally stop and look back, the way I'm doing right now, sitting here telling you this, that the whole shape of it actually becomes visible. The shop didn't create the story. The story created the shop. Every single part of it. The suitcase, the doors that said no, the dried milk on the shelves, the council flat, the switchboard at night, the rooms I never expected to stand in, the masters finished in stolen hours, the month that didn't work, the table that did, the silence of COVID, and now this shop, holding all of it, whether the person walking through the door knows it or not. Until next time, stay unforgettable.